Lounge Entertainment, and the time is right with T-Pre.
Grand rising, loungers. I hope everybody is doing as awesome as I am. Shout out to all of you for making it to 2023. We are supernatural, futuristic out this bitch. I truly appreciate you guys in 2023. And this year I really want to focus on the content. Not so much the fuckery, but the content this year. Okay. And one of the conversations that we've been having around the sector lately is regarding colorism. And I actually had this conversation about 4 months ago with my members. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is play for you guys a members only video that I did in 2022 with my members regarding the Blue Vein Society. Okay. I really think it's important to have this discussion and very important to have this conversation because, hey, we are truly experiencing a lot in regards to colorism, and this has always been a problem in our society. So the video is about 2 hours long, so you guys make sure that you grab your libations, make sure you sit back, and we're going to go ahead and discuss this. And again, like I said, this was a conversation that I had with my members. So let's go ahead and get into it, and bear with me just a moment. Let me know if you guys don't hear it when it comes up. Hey, loungers. I hope everybody is doing as great as me. Shout out to all of you who will tune in and catch out the show. We have a lot of awesome things we're going to be talking about tonight. I have a fire panel. Dr. Bombay, Dr. Nikki Proctor-Walden, as well as We Unlock Nation will be in the building. And we are going to be talking about colorism tonight and many things that have been plaguing us as American Black people and how we can change that nowadays. Peace, Dr. Nikki. I appreciate you being in the building. I'm not sure if you can hear me or not. Let me know if you can hear me. Hey, Josephine, I appreciate you being in the building as well. And for everybody else that will catch the replay. I'm going to go ahead and play a timer for everybody so everybody can get settled and get comfortable and get ready. And then we're going to get right into the conversation. And again, I truly appreciate you guys. Make sure that you guys are hitting the like button because I am going to make this video public at some point. So be careful what you put in the chat as well because, again, this will be a public conversation at some point. So if there is something that you don't want to come out, then of course, you don't want to put that in the chat, okay? But just letting you guys know that. I'm going to go ahead and play our 10-minute timer so everybody can come into the show and we can get ready for the show. Hey, Dr. Nikki. as the timer. Hold on. Let me just do All right, guys, I spared you guys the timer, so
All right.
All right, guys, I am so glad that you all are here. Shout out to all of y'all. I've got Dr. Nikki Proctor-Walden in the building. I have Dr. Bombay in the building, and we on lock in the building, not in any order, but I truly appreciate all of you for being in here. This is going to be a fire discussion tonight. I think that all of you have expertise in this matter, and I think that we need to talk about it. So shout out to all of you. Did you guys want to introduce yourselves to the conversation? Dr. Nikki, starting with you.
Dr. Nikki Proctor-Walden, and I'm just happy to be here with T. Pre. Miss T. Pre is definitely a good friend of mine, and I guess I can say that I am a certified scholar.
And yes, you are.
For sure.
And that's why I handpicked you for this conversation.
And I'm humbled by it.
Yes, ma'am. I particularly handpicked y'all for this conversation. So, Dr. Bombay, did you want to say something?
Yes, I want to welcome myself to the panel here. My name is Dr. Bombay. You probably remember me. Throughout the sector here, I have something to add this evening. Hopefully, it'll be a wonderful discussion that we can build upon. Although I'm not a real doctor, but I do play one on YouTube, and I do have at least 4 associate degrees, one of which is in sociology. So I feel as though I'm more than competent to add to this discussion and make it a fruitful one at best. And I thank you for having me.
That part, sir. And I know you got everything to bring to it. Shout out to you. We on lock. What's happening, bro? I appreciate you being in the building, bro.
It's good to be here amongst such intelligent ladies and gentlemen. Let's get into it.
Absolutely, bro. I really appreciate you being here. I know that all of you are mature enough to have this conversation. And
Definitely.
I felt that we needed to have at least 2 women and 2 men on the conversation, to talk about this. We're all Black. We all have Black heritage, Black American heritage. Some of us have studied this in school. We've talked about this to our students and other colleagues. And I think that this is something that we need to talk about. But before we get into it, I actually want to play a video from Dr. Bombay
Uh-oh.
on my Black Lounge Entertainment intro.
I can't.
You guys know that I am going to be doing sector music, and shout out to Dr. Bombay. I really appreciate you for this. I know that you and Propane were kind of going back and forth on intros for me, and I wanted to play yours. I did play Propane's last video, so I'm gonna go ahead and play yours now. This is our new sector music, so I'm gonna go ahead and play that. All right. All right, let's go ahead. Let's play it.
There comes a time in everyone's life where sometimes
shout out to Dr. Bombay.
Where's the video?
Yes, it has.
Y'all don't see it?
I don't want you to fret about it.
All right,
I want you to come on over.
All right, hold on.
And T. Pre, I'm back there in the choir, so I need my shout out.
You know it. Okay. I don't know why y'all don't see it. Why don't you? Okay. Bear with us, guys. This video was very, very fun. We had a great time in our members only that day. So shout out to us, but make sure you guys just bear with us, okay? And hit the like button on the way in. You
I'm
know
just
why?
kidding.
It's because I have this. I have the brand up. Let me take the brand off real quick. Yeah. So we are going to play this video, and let's go ahead. Okay. So now I have the branding off. So let me go ahead and start again.
Over here and catch this great show with breaking the contract of Shakim and Miss T. Prenup, because they're gonna put it down for you. Come on now, I know heaven children. You're gonna have to wait a little bit longer, because you know that intro is about 20 minutes long. That heifer's gonna make you wait.
The tarot cards don't lie.
You're watching her in commercials.
No, they don't.
She's gonna keep
know
you
it.
waiting.
And we ain't got to be
That's
certified.
right, anticipating to hear her talk about that same old bullshit that everybody else is talking about.
But
in
you
the
must
sector.
be divine.
Come on now, help
You
out
must
choir.
be divine and black.
If there ever was a place, if there ever was a place
Good day.
that I could go, you know you can go. A holy place, the holiest
Where is
of
the
a place
holiest
to
place?
cleanse my soul.
Amen,
Healing in
brother.
your life, it would have to be. Where is it? The Blackest Lounge, you see,
Blackest Lounge. Damn
where
it.
that whole deep breeze,
With
That
the
whole
whole
deep
thing.
breeze.
The time is right. Oh, deep breeze. The time is
This is my fault.
For you and me. You better believe it. Let's go tonight.
Ah.
Back to make it right.
Amen, Lord.
Black Lounge on light. For you to see. The time is right.
Right.
For deep breeze. The time is right. For you and me. Let's go tonight. Lord, make it right. Black Lounge no light. No light for you to see.
You know what, Bombay? Yo, I have to say I loved it, though. I absolutely loved it. I thought it was amazing. I thought it was great. I love you guys for all that y'all do. Shout out to Dr. Bombay for that. That was super, super duper funny. And I just really wanted you guys to see that. But then I'm going to play the real one now, which is actually something that Dr. Bombay created as well. So shout out to Dr. Bombay for the real out intro.
I think that one should be the real.
But we're gonna go ahead and play it. And that one honestly was my goddamn fault, because I said, Bombay, we need a gospel version of this.
I'm waiting on the bluegrass version with the
He
banjo.
made that within 4 hours. I promise y'all he did it. I promise y'all he did that. So shout out to Bombay for that. But we're gonna go ahead and play the real one right now.
It's Black Lounge Entertainment, and the time is right with T-Pre.
You know it's heavy. You know it's heavy. Anyway, I appreciate y'all being in the building. Shout out to y'all. Y'all are awesome. I have been doing an extensive amount of research on this conversation. This was something that came into on my desk, actually. I had always heard about the brown paper bag situation and how we were compared to that color as Black people over the years. But I'd never heard of the Blue Vein Society until a few weeks ago. And I started looking into it, and I realized from that how we have come to certain terms with ourselves as Black people on how we treat one another. And I wanted to bring in some scholars and some people that have had discussions like this, some older folks who have had conversations with their family members, who have very multiple hues within their family, and can talk about this, even down to where we've had these types of conversations within the sector. and in other sectors too. So starting with Dr. Nikki, I know that you have a degree in African American Studies. I know that you've also been involved with this and have taught this to your students. And one of the things I wanted to start off with was, how have you actually approached your students with this kind of conversation? Has it been easy to have this conversation? And if not, why?
Well, so it depends on which institution I'm at, where, I don't know, what time of day, what semester it is, and what's going on in the world. Because I think that one of the things that I find most troubling about trying to have this kind of dialogue is that the Generation Z, Zers, really think that race does not exist, and they really don't invest in conversations dealing with the color complex. So when I refer to it, I refer to it as a color complex or issues with the color line or passing. So for some of them to have these conversations about skin color, it's kind of like, well, why are we talking about this? And in today's society, it doesn't really matter. Because for the most part, Generation Zers really do think that they get things just because they show up, and that, they kind of will all of this good fortune to them.
Right,
They
right,
really don't have any idea of their positionality in different environments and how pretty privilege works, because oftentimes that's associated with complexion, as well as how complexion plays a role within the judicial system as well. And I like to always start the conversation historically with some of the names that they know and they kind of take for granted, that they understand why these people were chosen, or why these people had the advantages, if you will, that they had. And we can start off with Booker T. Washington. Even in his piece, The Atlanta Exposition, in the introduction, he is presented as like the best representation of the Negro race. And what the undertones of that is that his presentation, meaning his phenotype, because he was fair skinned, makes him less threatening. Whereas someone like a Marcus Garvey would not receive that same type of welcome, or would not be afforded to be the representation of the Black race, because the Blacker you are, the more threatening you are, just
right.
in presence alone. So I have to kind of start it and situate it in that type of context to kind of get them to understand, you know, what that looks like over time.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's a great prelude to this, because um, the many that you mentioned actually have dealt with colorism, okay, such
Mhm.
as Marcus Garvey and many others. And one of the things that you mentioned, which I think is a big factor in this, is Generation Z, okay, which
Mhm.
happens to encompass our children, okay, happens to encompass most of our children. Now, some of us have a Generation W, which is a new generation, okay, which is a younger generation from Generation Z, maybe 13 or 12 or so. And they still have a mindset of how the world is. They have a mindset of how racism exists or doesn't. And I think that's a very great conversation to kind of start off with, just particularly talking about the younger generations and how we can kind of shape how they think or what they think. And I loved having the conversation with you, Nikki, because you've been able to teach Generation Z, and even probably some younger ones, which happen to be your grandchildren, in regards to race. We unlock
as well as millennials.
Yes, which happens to be Generation Z. Those are the millennials, which I have 4 children in that range. So we unlock. Did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
First of all, I never even the letters are interesting. I mean, I've heard of Generation X, Generation Z, Generation W. Those are new to me. I think a lot of times, especially back in the day, in my experience, you had, I came out fair skin. I explained this to you earlier, that I came out fair skin, but my grandfather was light skinned, and my great grandfather was light skinned. My great great grandfather was light skinned, and they joined the U.S. Army. And I remember my grandfather always telling me that he was being treated like, the good boys on the block, mainly because he had a whole bunch of white and dark skinned friends. But the thing about it is, you didn't hear about the dark skinned friends too much because they feel like that they might get rejected. And I was like, no, why? Is because, they always like to put people in the back, way in the back burner where they won't be seen. And he said to me, son, I think you really need to read upon things like the paper doll the paper bag test. And I read into the paper bag test, and if you were as darker as the bag, then you were rejected most times. And I used to like, why do they fear us? Why do they hate us so much? It's because of your skin, son. It's because of it. They think that you are inferior. They think that you are just as dumb as a bag of rocks. And really, that's not true, because the black man is just as intelligent, just as fast, just as strong, and just as proud as his counterparts, the white man. But they would rather take a lighter person of your ilk, just like they did in slavery back in the day. And then back in the day, we all know as intelligent people that light-skinned people were in the big house, eating up, sometimes the master will give you parts of his cornbread to eat. And they gave everybody else slop. They gave everybody the worst part of the pig. And we all know that, the women, the slave women, always found a way out of no way. And that used to put tears in my eyes. It's like, why do they hate us so much? Why does it take up until this day, this generation, and even in these times in 2022, it's still an issue why they would hate us so much? And is it because black people, the darkest of the dark, generate more vitamin C from the sun? Is it because of our melanin? What could it be? It still baffles me to this day.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely think, just based off of what I've experienced, and also what I have researched and what I've witnessed from others in my family, that it's definitely something about us that is different from anyone else, for why we are targeted. And I never understood that, particularly until now. Well, until recently, I'll say that. I can say that I've kind of understood, or I thought I understood, but I particularly did not, because again, this is not a conversation that I've had very often in my family. Okay. Particularly because we have multiple hues, we have multiple, what you would say, races within my family. Okay. So I have natives, I have blacks, I have whites, I have all kinds of people in my family. I don't have any Hispanic people, but other than my son's girlfriend. But other than that, I don't have any, Hispanic folks, but I do have other hue colors and what I know to be Black people in my family. So we don't often have the conversation about race. Well, we've had the conversation about race, but we don't often have the conversation about colorism. Okay. Whether somebody's better because they're light skinned or dark skinned or so. And so this conversation to me is quite new. This is something that I've just recently started looking into. I started having conversations with the older generations that are still here, such as my parents and so forth, in regards to this, and they both had a lot to add to this conversation. So, but before I get into that, I wanted to talk with you guys and see what you guys thought, and also Dr. Bombay. I know that you're now here. I know you were having some problems, but I brought you back up. So I just wanted to have a conversation with you. I know that you have a friend who is very, very light skinned. I had seen her on your panel, and she had talked about this briefly in regards to her father. I can't remember her name, but I know that she's a good friend of yours. She does some hiking with you. She has a father who was super, super light skinned. And he used to talk to her about her skin tone and about how she needs to carry herself in these streets, just based off of her skin tone, so that she can have extra privileges and, and so forth. And I just wanted to get your thoughts on that, and whether you've had those types of conversations in your family, and how that has shaped your thoughts on colorism. If you can hear me, Bombay. Okay, you're muted if you
I was
can't.
muted. I'm sorry.
Okay,
I was
there you
muted.
go.
Hey,
Hey,
I
Bombay.
just I want to address that. I just wanted to kind of flash back to the point of the new generation real quick for about 1 minute. With the
Okay,
new
that's fine.
with the new generation, I find two things here. I find hope with them, and then I feel despair. And the reason why the hope comes in is because they are not being indoctrinated into our ill ways of thinking when it comes to race and
Right.
color and things like that. I remember part of my dilemma growing up was always hearing something, the white man, the white man, the white man, the white man. It gave me a complex, as though I really started to feel like, man, it's a brick wall outside. There's no point in me going out there because I won't be successful. Whereas these younger people, now two things. I like how Dr. Nikki spoke on how they're kind of Pollyanna, or they're disillusioned because they don't know what they're going to be facing. Like, the world is still colorized a lot. So that's one thing. But on the flip side, I said the hope comes in because they don't see things in the same way. So that gives me some hope that maybe this generation can get it right. When they all grow up, will they take on all of our old ways, the ways we were taught, even on both sides of the fence, with the whites and the blacks? Will these new young people grow up and shape a new world? That's that. Into my friend, that was Miss Petula Caesar. She wrote a book called She's Such a Bright Girl, about her whole childhood and life surrounding that. What was funny is when we were teenagers, I used to visit her and it was okay because I was light enough. Now, the thing is, at the time, I never knew that. I'm like, well, her dad is cool with me being on the porch and hanging out. But her boyfriend, who was dark skinned, not as much. You know, you didn't see him around, and he would often refer to him as that black dot, or you know, it's not funny, but he never called him by his name. He just called him.
Right.
It was always black something with whatever.
It is funny.
Now what was
It is funny.
now?
It is funny. You know,
Yeah,
we laugh like hell when
can laugh
people
about
calling
it
people
now.
with the black joke.
Yeah,
But
it's
when you think about it, when
Not
you
that
think
black
about it,
dot.
right?
yeah.
When you
She
think
said
about
the
it,
black,
though,
the
Bombay,
black dot.
you're
Now
yeah.
she wrote about that. She wrote about that in the book. And what was funny is him when he was giving her wigs growing up, saying, "Wear this wig and marry a white man," and he grilled her to death. And in the book, you know, if you ever, I'll send you all a copy. She
Please
talks
do.
about how one day she looked under the bed and she found this trunk, and Dad had every black revolutionary, every black, you know, W.B. Du Bois, Booker T. Washington. He had all of the writings of every prominent black person in America. So it wasn't that he wasn't down with the cause, but he was more so, he thought that would be a way for her to survive. He said, "You'll marry a white man, you'll be in prestige, you'll survive." So that plays into the whole stepping up in society by joining the Blue Vein, you know, and becoming a part of that group, because she had a complexion for the protection, you know, being cream colored as she was. In my family, it was the typical things as you would always see. You know, the new grandchildren were coming out of the chute when I was younger, and some of them were, you know, my family on my father's side have all those funny colored eyes, and they were when they were light skinned and they had the funny colored. I call them that because you know why? Because we were all our brown eyed people never got treated special, so I kind of reversed it. So your eyes are funny, but anyway.
Right,
They
right.
were always praising. "Oh, she's so beautiful. She's so beautiful." And then you have the little chocolate grandchild in the cart, and it's like, oh, that's not, her outfit is cute, you know. And I'm like, damn, what happened to the beauty and the praise and all that? And although it wasn't spoken, it was subconscious, but it was blatant. And what they didn't know years later, it caused a lot of sibling rivalry and cousin rivalry, whatever else you want to call it. Because we would grow up, and I always wondered, where do we get this from? We would say, "With your black self, with your black ass, you black, tar baby." We would like go back and forth with the high yellow and the dark skin jokes ranking on each other. And I always wondered, where the hell did we get that ignorance? Because I never heard my parents say it directly, but then I realized we were programmed subconsciously, you know, and it translated into us where as children, and it comes out of us in an immature way where we're ranking on each other with jokes. And I remember one time my babysitter, we were going at it, and she came in there and she said, "Shut your stupid asses up." And she called my buddy Peanut, who was high yellow, and he kept calling his brother black, this black, and she called him shit colored. And I didn't know what that meant. I just thought that was like a slur for him, you know, her calling him some name just to make him, you know, feel a certain way or something. But years later, I found out when I asked her, I said, "Miss, what do you mean we used to call him shit color?" She said, that's a person that's transparent, but they feel full of shit and they appear to be black, but they really are not. So that's what she was saying. Like, when you act like that, you're not really a black person because you're judging other black people when it's ignorance. But it was just funny. So yeah, I experienced a lot of that, whether it was subtle, whether it was blatant or otherwise, but most of it was subconscious programming and some of it more direct.
Yeah. I can say this. I've had conversations with my father in regards to my color when I was a child. My father happens to be one that is a descendant of white folks. Okay. He has on his father's side a mixture. He has black and white people. And then on his mother's side, they're all natives. Everybody from my great grandmother, my great great grandmother and my great great grandfather were native people. Okay, they're from this land. They actually started off here. They were free blacks. They were not slaves. They had children that were not slaves, and they settled in the land and have land still to this day down in South Carolina, down in Georgia, and other places. And then I have on my mother's side, where on my mother's side, I can't trace them at all. Her father was definitely a black man for sure. And her mother, I don't know. She died during birth, giving birth to either I know it wasn't my grandmother. I know it was her sister that she gave birth to, which is a black woman. She's from South Carolina. But they are black people. Okay. And I don't know if they're slaves or not, or if they were descendants of slaves. I can only say that their name is Williams. Okay. Which tells me that their surname is a slave name or is a master's name. Okay. Particularly when you get a son after the name, such as Johnson, Williamson, or something like that. That is a surname of a slave. Okay. So sometimes they will cut off the son and they'll just say something else like Johnson or Williams or something like that. And that will be a name that is a descendant of a slave. Okay. So that family on that side of the family definitely tells me, just based off of their surname, that they were slaves. Okay. Or that their descendants were, or that their ancestors were slaves, or that they came into a slave family. The other families have names like Polite, Hightower, and so forth, which are native names, okay? And so that's where we get that from. But the bottom line is we ultimately don't really get where, we usually don't understand where we start having conversations about our color, okay? And whether somebody's too light or somebody's too dark or so forth and so on. Now, I'm not going to lie. We've had multiple jokes and stuff like that when we were younger about Tar Baby and about, being too black or something like that. And as I got older, I became more sensitive to those types of conversations or those types of jokes per se. But now that I look back on it, I kind of wonder whether or not we were just ignorant to that, in my family. And it's not because we didn't want to know, but it's because nobody ever talked about it. Okay. Nobody particularly talked about the color of our skin. Nobody particularly talked about where we got it from, how we came there, how we got some people. Like I can look at a cousin that's super light skinned, look white as fuck. And then me, I'm black as hell, and we can't understand it, but we loved each other, and we had a relationship and still do. But we often, now that we're talking about this, and now that my cousins and I are talking about this, we kind of wonder where we got this from, or where this came from, and why this was not a regular conversation within our families, and so I wanted to talk about that a little bit because there's multiple people clearly within our society that have no idea about the Blue Vein Society, have no idea about the paper bag test and the paint test and stuff like that. And I particularly want to get into that tonight because I really think, as Dr. Bombay said, I definitely agree that the younger generations, okay, such as what Josephine was saying, and shout out to Joe, I appreciate you for saying that, and that the new generation is called the Generation Alpha. It's not Generation whatever I said, Generation W. It's Generation Alpha, okay? And that generation makes sense, and the word makes sense to me because I happen to have a 13-year-old son who is in that generation. Okay. And he has family like us that are light, dark, whatever. He don't care about any of that. And particularly he has friends that are white, black, Chinese. I remember a Spanish girl came to my house a couple of years ago, okay? She came knocking on my door asking for my son. And I'm looking at this girl like, what the hell? She was like, yeah, he was supposed to meet me at the hill. I said, what hill? Now I'm like, who is going to the hill? I want to know where the hill is. But the point is that my son has multiple races of friends girls and men and boys and stuff like that that are attracted to him as a friend. And he is as so. And he has no, issues with what color you are, what color your eyes are, or none of that stuff. That stuff is foreign to him. It's very foreign. This type of conversation is super foreign to my son. And so I think it's important to have this conversation and to talk about this and open it up to our children, our grandchildren, and how we can approach this type of conversation with them. Because I don't think that the same ideas that we've had in the past will plague the future. I really don't. And I'd like to talk about that.
Well,
Yeah, I
if
definitely
I
agree.
go ahead. Who's that? We on live?
Go ahead,
Yeah.
we on live.
How you doing, Nikki? How you doing?
I am well. How are you?
I'm good. Blessed, very blessed. I think it's very important to talk, especially our young kids today. And when my oldest son, he's my only son, he's 7 years old, and so I will have to have a discussion with him about this type of thing, and that it really doesn't affect him because he goes to a private school, and of course he has people around my area that he can play with. But at some point in time, I'm gonna have to have this discussion with them, because it's saying you are not alone, and if you don't feel left out or isolated just because you're my complexion. When you came out your mama womb, you look white to me. I'm like, what the hell's going on? It's like, is this something I don't know about? It's like,
Stop it.
no, nigga.
Stop it.
And then later on, it was like, God gave you some little color on you. I'm like, okay, cool. But I had to explain to him that not every. I mean, you had darker skinned people versus lighter skinned people. It was always competition. It's just like back in the day where Duke Ellington, I believe that's his name. Hardy. Anyway, and
Yeah, that's a good
Cab
Thank
Calloway.
you.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
Cab Calloway.
Cab Calloway.
Absolutely.
Calloway and, Duke Ellington, they played up at the Cotton Club,
Yes,
and
sir.
of course they had women in the background that were dancing for them, but there was a particular problem. Of course, if you were a little chocolatey, I mean, you had to remain in the back, because of course that little thing where you had to be 5 foot, you had to be 5 foot or taller, and of course you had to have that beautiful, elegant, light skin look, and to please these white audiences. And to this day, of course, you're going to have what I would call the Morris Chestnut and what was the other brother's name? I forgot. I'm blanking. Morris Chestnut and
Wesley Snipes.
the light skinned brother. The light skinned brother.
Shamar.
Shamar Moore. Shamar Moore. It was always talks about light skin is back in full effect. And now in this generation, I could talk to him about LeBron James and of course Stephen Curry. Now, of course, Stephen Curry, 4-time NBA champion, LeBron James, 4-time NBA champion. Two known brothers in the NBA, and either way, even though Stephen Curry is looked at as the pretty boy. And
where?
Okay, because I'm like, no, bro.
You mean the dirty boy.
A lot of women look at him as a pretty boy. I'm just saying.
Absolutely
a little
not.
uncooked, okay, sir. No,
So,
no.
so I'm okay.
Get a little
So,
pink in the eyes.
So,
but you know, he has a brother. He has a brother, right? So two brothers have looked at it. Well, he's more famous. Okay? One has the jewelry, and the other does not. So I'm just saying, he's looked at as the pretty boy to other women. I can't speak for other women. That's all I'm saying.
That actually ties into the conversation. We're gonna get a little deep into that because what is considered pretty and what is considered not? Because to me, that ain't it, bro. Okay, like
not at all. Not at all. And of course,
That
you know,
ain't
I'm over here itching to dying to get in to say something, but we on
Honey,
lock. I'm being patient. Go
I'm
ahead.
gonna wait. I'm gonna let you finish, bro. I'm gonna let you finish.
I'm very interested. I'm very interested in what Dr. Nikki Proctor has. I'm interested.
Yeah. Let's jump in, Nikki. Jump in.
Okay,
Nikki.
so going back into, you know, some Black intellectuals that are, you know, that people respect and have international, you know, fame, etc. I wanted to bring your attention to something that W.E.B. Du Bois said about Marcus Garvey, because they would be considered to be contemporaries. And it was something, and this is actually in writing. So, you know, somebody wants to fact check to see if Dr. Nikki knows what she's talking about. I would love to direct you to a book and read it. But he says that Garvey suffered from serious defects of temperament and training, and described him as a little fat black man, ugly with a big. Now, this is coming from W.B. Du Bois talking about Marcus Garvey.
Okay, can you repeat that one more time? Because
He said that this man suffered from serious defects of temperament and training, and he described him as a little fat black man, ugly, and also that he had a big head. So this is somebody who is considered. Go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
This is somebody who is who is considered to be like the epitome of what it means to be a black intellectual in Du Bois, first black man to graduate from Harvard. You know, he also established the NAACP and the paper that came along with the NAACP. And one of the things that made Marcus Garvey so powerful is that he said whenever he went to the NAACP's meeting, he looked around and he didn't see anybody who looked like him, because all of these people would be members of the Blue Vein Society, which is again kind of what we're talking about. And basically all it means is that you're able to look at your wrist and see your blue veins, not search for them, but they are prominent, that you could see your blue veins. And that was all it took for you to be a part of this society. Now, we also know that there are other organizations. You know, we can talk about Greek organizations. We could talk about what this looks like in the church, as far as, you know, these exclusionary type of practices that stem from, you know, a blue vein society, and this way of fitting in. Because before we had all of this organizing, Black people passed for access. So those who could go into town and buy things that darker skinned people could not buy, you know, they would go and get it so that their families could benefit. So this was not something of, okay, we're going to get together and we're going to further separate ourselves, which is what Du Bois is the talented 10th ended up doing, which was not what he intended. So if you want to fact check Dr. Nikki on that, you can look at the memorial address where W.B. Du Bois goes from, he chastises his, you know, talented 10th, and then he introduces this idea of the guiding 100th to try to broaden that reach, to say, hey, it's more of us now who have access, who have, you know, social capital. So why are we not taking care of the least of these? Your job was not to grow, you know, to go off and become this elitist, upper class, separatist, you know, whatever, which is what they actually became. Because what happens is that we have the oppressor and we have those who are oppressed. But when those who have been oppressed come into some sort of power or get some sort of, as I said, social capital, then they take on the mentality of the oppressor. And that's what the problem is. So it's not about, the Generation Alpha, not having access to stuff. The reason why their outlooks are going to be different is because of the barriers that have been broken by all of the people in the generations before, so that when they look at the TV, they can see all of this diversity and all of this inclusion. However, it is a disservice for people to think that you shouldn't be anchored in history, because at some point in time, these historical behaviors will surface in those people, because studies show that children don't normally encounter racism because it's always an encounter. It's all, race and gender are always present, but racism is always like an encounter. And this encounter is always one that has some trauma associated with it. It's oftentimes happens in a very public place. So, there's that public shaming that comes along with it. And then you have this post trauma that plays over and over again because it changes the way that you move. So again, this whole thing of this lighter skin was about mobility and being able to move in places where before there was something there that would stop you from being able to do so. But going back into this whole thing of history, there is a part of your blackness where there's a history that's associated with it, and you do yourself a disservice when you don't have these conversations when they're ready. Now, as I was saying, I have one more point, and then I'll pass the mic to someone else. But as I was saying about this whole thing of racism, one, it's a learned behavior, because just about everything that we do as human beings learn. You have to be taught how to be black, and white folks have to be taught how to be white. They actually they do. It's a learned behavior. And most of the time they encounter this like around maybe the third grade, which would make you 7, 8 years old, where you'll have your parents saying stuff like, no, we don't go over there and play with them like that. Or no, you can't go over there. So that's why I was laughing when T Pre was like, this little, what'd you say, Asian, Hispanic, Mexican, whatever, came up to the door for your son. And you was like, wait a minute, that's kind of like what's going on. But your response is an innate response because you are a black woman of a son. And there was a time in history where for black women, every time their black sons, fathers, uncles, dads, grandparents left the house, there was always this fear of they may not return. So it's always about a safety thing. So your response was not necessarily one of, wait a minute, you don't belong here, but it was about protection for your son, because of there's still spaces where this is not okay. It's not okay. And it could cause trauma to him, not her.
Because in all honesty, we at the time we had lived in a predominantly Hispanic neighborhood. And that's true. Even though I didn't think about that at the time, but psychologically thinking about it, when I think back to it, my ultimate goal was to protect my son.
Absolutely.
And I think that was what it was. If it had been a black girl that came to the door, it might have been a little bit different, even though I still would have wondered where the hill was.
Exactly. Like, what the hell y'all doing on the hill?
Yeah. What y'all doing?
That sounds like, like back in the day, we say in the cut, we in the cut. Well, what the hell y'all doing in the cut?
What's in the cut, right?
Thank you. Goes down in the cut.
Right. But the fact that it was a Hispanic girl, that could have definitely, well, actually, I will say that probably definitely played a role in it. How I responded to it. I don't know. I hate to say that,
Well, we're predisposed to certain reactions and responses. So it's almost like you have to step outside of it to say why. But, during the 50s, 60s, 40s, 50s, when lynching was on an all-time high, there were black women who said that the only way they could keep their babies safe if they were born a male would be to kill them at birth, because every time you left the house, there was a chance that you wouldn't make it back.
Right. Right.
And imagine the trauma, that a woman who is, carrying a life and developing a life, you have people that are born into trauma
Right.
My
Right.
God.
just because of that.
Yeah.
And this is not something that's made up.
It's not.
So it's
And
about protection and
right.
safety.
Right. Which
My
is something that I wanted to bring up before I get into what you were about to say, Winlock, where you talked about experiences with racism. Okay. Now,
It's
as I
their
told you guys,
encounters. They're not experiences. They are
well,
encounters that become an experience.
exactly, which is what happened to me. Now, I'm going to tell you guys about 2 times where this happened to me. Where, like I said, in my family, I've had conversations, particularly with my father, in regards to race, but I have never had these conversations with anyone else. My mom, with my grandparents, anybody. Now, I'll tell you my first experience with racism, okay? And then I'll tell you my second and how it shaped how I think. The first time I experienced racism, I was 18 years old, actually. I had just gave birth to my child, my oldest child. She's 25. Shout out to my baby. She's 25 years old. And at the time, I was 18. So I had to get some medication for her. I forgot what it was, but either way, she was just born, and she was born jaundice. And there was something that I had to get for her. I can't remember what it was, but anyway, they wanted me to get it, and I went to the pharmacy close to where we lived. We lived in a predominantly white neighborhood. Okay, there was a lot of white folks around there. There was some black peoples, sprinkled here and there, including our family, and there were some others, Hispanics and Indians and so forth, or Asians and so forth. Either way, I went to the pharmacy. I called in the prescription, and I went to the pharmacy and put the prescription in, and then I went back home. And when I went to go pick it up, they didn't call me, which is usually what happens here in Delaware. They will call you and let you know that the prescription is not available at that place, and they'll send you to a place where it is. Okay, or let you know, give you some ideas of where it is. When I got there, it was about 8:30 at night, and they said they didn't have the prescription. My mom was with me. They said, yeah, they didn't have the prescription, and I just need to figure it out. They didn't say those words, but that was the words, kind of what they said. My mother was very, very distraught by what they said. And she let me know it was racism. And I really wasn't willing to go with that at the time. I just heard her and everything. And that was because of what I had been exposed to all my life. I had never particularly experienced anything like that. And so I heard her and so forth and so on. But now that I'm looking back on it, well, it took a couple years. But now that I'm looking back on it, I know it was because of racism. I know it was because I'm a Black woman. Okay. But I didn't understand that at the time, because I was so naive to that kind of stuff, because I had never really had those types of conversations. I had never really understood where that was coming from. So that was my first experience with that. The second time was when I was in Old Dominion University. Shout out to Virginia Union.
Okay, ODU.
ODU, bitch. Yeah. And one night we were out there, and there was a white girl at the school that had called in a bomb threat. She was pissed off at some nigga she was fucking. Okay, the black guy, he from DC, and she was pissed off at him over, I don't know what they was over, but either way, she called in a bomb threat. Okay, and act like it was him calling it in. So the police came out there. This is in the news. So y'all can look this up. It was back in 99, I think, 98, 99. Anyway, police came up there. They came out there and they had all of us students get on buses and stuff. Okay. So we got on these different buses to get out of the campus and, you know, kind of get away from there. And then the police were out there. They had the fire trucks and everything. And we were kind of getting restless, you know, because they had us on there for hours. Okay. And then finally, when we got off the buses, because we were just tired of being on the buses, I remember, and I can't tell you everything that happened because this was so long ago. Okay. This was a long time ago. Okay. I might act like I'm 20, but a bitch ain't 20. Okay. So this was a long time ago. But I remember when I got off the bus, I was with some friends and I looked up. And when I looked up, there was a whole team of white men standing in front of me. And they had hoses pointed at us. Okay. And they were ready to spray our asses. We weren't doing anything. We weren't doing anything wrong. We weren't yelling, screaming, hollering, jumping up and down or nothing. We were just getting off the bus. But their fear of us getting off that bus was fear of us rioting or us starting, you know, an event that wasn't even there, you know? But their fear of that was having them screaming at us, yelling at us, and jumping in our faces and tossing niggas to the side and tossing niggas to the ground and all kinds of stuff. And I was confused. Like I didn't understand at that moment. I was 19. I was 19 or 20 at that time. I was about 19 or 20 at that time. And I was very confused as to why they were treating me like that. You know, like I didn't understand because to me, I was just a person, you know, just getting off a bus. I had never particularly I had those conversations with my father, but I never got deep into race. I never got deep into why somebody might be fearful of my skin color, you know, and stuff like that. And even though I was 20 years old and y'all might think that that's very naive, you got to understand the background that I have. I have a background that was very sheltered. My parents kept certain things from me. I was in a Jehovah's Witness organization. So we thought everybody was friends and family and love, you know. So I never really particularly understood the race thing until that moment. Like once that happened to me, and once I came to terms with why they were so fearful of me, it changed my life. It really did. It changed my mindset. It changed the way that I look at people. It changed the way that I do things. And I just wanted to talk about that because Nikki, you brought that up and how certain things and circumstances in your life may change how you feel, you know, or change how you look at things like this.
Absolutely. That's why I said the word encounter, because it's like you don't expect it. So
Right.
when it happens, there's like a trauma that's associated with that because you don't expect to go to get something for your, you know, something as ubiquitous as going to get something for your daughter or for your baby from the pharmacy. Like that's what you go to the pharmacy for because
Right.
you're in need of something, you know, to take care of something. So to say, you know, I can't have it because you don't like the way I look, or I can't step in your store because I am dark skinned and there's a certain power and fear associated with that. But let me digress for a second. This is why I used to tell people I wish I was the color of midnight.
Right. Right.
Because that lets you know when I come up on the scene, I'm not playing with you. And you should fear what I possess. Because I'm empowered and I'm liberated.
Right.
You know, y'all can be
Which is
free, but
how
I'm
I look at
liberated in
myself
my
now.
thinking.
Right. Which is
And
how
I know wherever I take my black body, I'm making a political statement because I'm taking it in spaces where I haven't always been welcomed. I know this.
Yep.
So I don't roll up by mistake. It's definitely on purpose.
Absolutely.
And And one more thing I just wanted to say, because I think that this will be important, as we continue to chop this situation up, is
Sure.
that oftentimes, and what made me think about this was we on lot bringing up, LeBron James versus a Stephen Curry.
Yes,
You
ma'am.
know, the complexion has really nothing to do about your features, which really is what should attract one person to another. Because, I have seen some very unattractive, very light skinned people, and some super fine, very dark skinned people. So, but, I look for features, not your complexion, you know. So it's funny how, like, how superficial this is. So that's the point I'm making. It is so superficial because if you're dark skinned, you have to have nice features to get that second look.
Right.
Whereas if you're lighter skinned, we are pre-programmed to think that that's better and
Right.
that you already are gorgeous and a catch.
Regardless of how you
And
look.
it's not until, you really start looking at stuff to be like, oh, wow, her nose is so big, or her, or
Mhm.
she's not aging well, those kinds of things,
Yes, and I wanted to say something about that before I get to We Unlock into Bombay. I've often heard, as a chocolate woman, I've often heard that I am beautiful for a dark-skinned woman. Or
Right, as opposed to just beautiful, period, because my
right,
features are on fleek.
exactly, bitch, because I'm just sexy. You know what I mean?
Thank you. It's like this smile will
It's
stop
fine,
ships.
bitch.
You know what I'm saying? Start wars. What you talking about?
Yeah, but I've often heard that, and that's true. And there was a time where I accepted that when I was younger. I've heard that and said, that would, to me, that was normal because that was what I heard, you know. And I've heard various things like, oh, you are so pretty for a chocolate girl, or your skin is so beautiful for a beautiful dark skinned woman, or something like that. And I used to be like, oh, thank you, just keep it moving. Now I'm like, what?
Exactly. Because going back to the Du Bois statement,
Pretty
we would call
anyway,
him a
bitch.
colorist. And not only that, he believed in phrenology because he talked about how big his head was. Phrenology has been bunk science for a very long time. So, Du Bois wouldn't make it in 2022. He would be canceled.
Let me just bring that up for a future video.
Sure.
W.B. Du Bois was a Republican. Okay.
Well, black people were Republicans back then. That's what
Yes,
it was.
black folks
Yeah.
were Republicans, especially light-skinned black folks, and we're going to talk about that in a future video.
Cool.
But We Unlock. What's going on? What you think right now? And Bombay too. I
wanted to ask you, Miss T. Pre, did you believe in your younger years, or even now, that your skin was a curse or a blessing?
I never thought either way, honestly. I didn't think that it was either one. I didn't think whether or not that it was a curse or a blessing. I will say that once I experienced my first encounter with racism, I began to question my color. I will say that. At the age of 18 is when I first realized I'm a black woman. You see what I'm saying? Like, I lived in a predominantly white neighborhood at the time. And yeah, I had started to wonder. I had started to look at myself a little bit different. Even though my father had kind of taught me those things, he had kind of told me those things, that wasn't something I paid attention to until I actually encountered it myself. So I didn't think it was a curse. I didn't think it was a blessing. But as I went along, I thought that the idea of me being dark skinned could be a curse if I'm in certain positions or if I'm in certain places. But I always thought that my chocolate skin was a blessing after that. Okay. Like it made me stand out. It made me show, it showed people who I am, and how I am. And it showed the abilities that I had, and and various things. But it took me a while to get there. because I was very confused after that. After those 2 encounters, I was super confused. So between, I would see 18 and 21 is where I was trying to find that. You know what I mean? Like I was really trying to understand my color and understand my race and understand my abilities in a sense because of my color, you know?
Okay.
Yeah. I didn't think it was a curse though. I never thought it was a curse.
Well, I'm asking that in because most of my friends would ask me, is like, or tell me, it's like, again, why is this such a thing? I just think it's such a curse. It's like, it's not a curse, it's a gift, because mainly this is what God gave you. I never take for granted what God has given me. But I'm gonna go based on my experience, okay? I was 7, I believe, when I was playing softball. My dad took me to softball practice, and of course, there were 2 lines. One, of course, you were hitting the ball, and 2, the other line was merely you had to catch the doggone thing. And so a white boy tried to cut me in line, and I said, it was like, I don't know what I was saying then, because I wasn't allowed to cuss back then. But I know a cuss word was flying in through my head at the time, because my dad would usually cuss. And he pushed me, I pushed him, and the first words out of his mouth was nigger. I'm like, what did you call me? He's like, you heard me, nigger. And so I didn't know what that was until I asked my dad. And I told my dad about it, and he said, this is what he said. I was like, yeah, that's what he said. He was like, next time that happens, you alert me immediately. And I was like, okay, but what does that mean? That was my first experience of racism. The colorism thing, my aunt, she's in the AKA. My aunt's in the AKA. I believe my mother-in-law, she's an AKA as well, but she's fair skinned like me. But I believe back in the, you ever heard of School? I believe y'all watched School Days from back in the day, where
Yeah.
they had the AKAs as
The wannabes and the jigaboos.
the wannabes and the jigaboos.
Now the jigaboos, I know about them.
versus the Delta Sigma, which were in my opinion, the more beautiful, the more kind, darker skin type, like females. Didn't really make no difference to me, because if you were AKA or you were a Delta, you all look beautiful to me. But that's not what society back then when I was growing up.
Now, my uncle told me that all of the ugly girls on campus were Zetas, and I said, "Oh, okay. Well," I told him all the Kappas on my campus were faggoty. So, what were you?
Wow.
This is old school. Now that's what we use. So, as I said, I don't need anybody from the LGBTQIA community because I said that, because that was the word at that time. However, my uncle, that's what he said when I crossed as Zeta, because he was a Kappa. And I was like, come on, bro, we're not gonna do this. So at any rate.
And we're gonna get into those too, because there's several of those, the Kappas and others that have these same standards, okay, and that have come up through the years with those same standards. The brown paper bag test and blue vein test and all kinds of stuff. So go ahead, Leon Locke. Let's hold on. I want to say something that Josephine.
I'm back.
Okay, Bombay. Josephine said, when I lived in Chicago, I experienced oppression, not racist. Okay, I'd like you to come up on the panel. I'm gonna put the link down. And the reason is because I know that in Chicago in particular, the Blue Vein Society was very prevalent. And it's something that I would like for you to discuss with us if you've ever experienced anything like that, or if you've ever seen anything like that. But go ahead, while I drop the link.
Yeah, but there's irony in what Josephine said, because Chicago was founded by a black man. So, again, life for Chicagoans is so much more different, because again, we didn't just have a Harlem Renaissance, we had a Chicago Renaissance, because people were migrating from the South up to Harlem, and then from Harlem over to Chicago, and then from Chicago out west, and then gang culture brought us right back to the East Coast with the drug trade.
And the West Coast, which is something that I'm going to talk about in a future video in regards to that, and how that racism amongst Black people spread from the Midwest all the way to the East, all the way to the West. Okay.
And I argue that Black people can't be racist, because racism is about power.
Exactly. I've always said that. That's something that I've taught my children.
We could be prejudiced, but not racist.
We can be extremely prejudiced people, but we can never be racist as long as we are not a dominant society. And that's
shout out to Dr. Claude Anderson.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. Yes.
No,
sir.
and Dr. Proctor Walden, shit.
Dr. Proctor Walden said, and Dr. Bombay.
Let me purchase your books.
Yeah.
Y'all go ahead and continue. Y'all continue.
Yeah, I was talking about the first experience with the racial thing. It's funny. When I was talking about growing up, when we were real little, I think first grade, maybe, we used to get half a day on Wednesdays. I know some of y'all probably remember that. And we used to have these race wars after school. It would just be Black versus white. And we would just all fight each other, right? For no reason, right? And I never understood why. All I knew is they were different, and we were taught that they were different. And of course, like I said, the subliminals coming from the parents. Do you know it wasn't until I saw Roots on TV that I really got the full impact of what it meant to be who we were and why there was this division and separation. At first, I just thought it was just two opposing teams. You know what I'm saying? So being packed out by a group of white boys, and just that was racially motivated, but I never knew why. You know what I'm saying? So that was like one of my first encounters with that. And like I said, I wasn't even awakened to the fact, which just leads me to believe that I don't know if that's something that we should have been taught, or maybe taught in a better way, is what I'm going to say, instead of just saying, hey, you just need to be against them, they're the enemy, versus hey, let me tell you the ignorance you're going to face from them and why. So that's my thing. And of course, throughout my career, it's always been little racial undertones everywhere, even in the military. You have it. We had a couple of racial episodes between us as soldiers, going at each other, because you got a lot of rednecks, man, that a lot of people I met had never seen anybody Black before, except on TV. So you get these weirdos, they want to touch your hair. They want to look at
rednecks are a special group of people. Gotta love them.
Yeah. So
especially the ones from the Appalachians.
Oh yeah, hell yeah.
Regions.
So it's ongoing. So like I said, I mean, again, hopefully the next generation will get it right.
Don't you just love those Peckerwoods? I love it when I was on a side note. I love it when my dad, when he got, a white man, came up and started violating his space. You always call them Peckerwoods. Like, Peckerwoods? Yeah, I forgot how it went, but he would call redneck, Peckerwood, and honky. Now I remember the honky thing. The honky things, I think it started off when the Ku Klux Klan came by, and they were betting $1 to see if they can find some Black people out there, and they started honking their horns, honking up the horns. And so I understand with us.
Oh, I thought it came from George Jefferson.
No.
Because he said honky with power and authority.
Yes, he did.
With his little short self. Honky.
Rest in peace, Sherman Hemsley. Rest in peace,
absolutely.
Yeah.
But Bombay, I wanted to ask you a question, my brother. as being a no homo chocolate brother yourself, have you ever had to smack up any white folks in your day, sir? I know I had.
I'm not really chocolate. I'm more of a mauve. But anyway,
you
no,
like a
no.
you like a light chocolate.
You like a mocha latte.
Mocha
There we
latte.
go. There we
You
go.
a latte. You a
Caramel,
Starbucks latte.
caramel
That's what you
macchiato
are.
grande.
Thank you. Thank
Got
you.
Yeah, nah, I never. You know what? You know what's funny? It never came down to that. Like the one time when, like I said, when I was in the military, the white boy was like, we were in near DC. We were stationed. I was in DC at the time, and he thought I was asleep, and he said, and it was somebody stabbed somebody. He goes, "What's the big deal? One nigger stabbed another nigger. What's the big?" And I heard the other dudes go, "Hey man, sorry about that, bro." They was trying to talk to me, and I ain't say nothing. I went and got the brothers together because we used to have this group called NATO. You know, all the brothers, it stands for niggas are taking over. You know, and so we used to all eat together and stuff in the army. So I told the brothers, I said, yeah, it seemed like Private Dean got a little problem. You know, the old Georgia boy got a little problem with his mouth, you know. So my homeboy Sykes went and stepped to him. We caught him in the hallway, and he was like, he said, "Hey man, what's up? I understand, you know, you got some chosen words for us, right?" He's like, "Nah, man, go ahead. I don't want no trouble." You'll find a lot of those racial, racists, and rednecks. They're the biggest punks in the world. You know, they talk that rhetoric, but they can't fight and they can't back it up. So, needless to say, his hand ended up going through a glass, and he got touched up and down a little bit, and he, you know, went up and down the steps a couple of times, and so it was like a big major deal. But no, I personally didn't get to touch him, but you know, it was just so that's the closest that came to that. You know what I'm saying? So they would never do nothing in my face directly, you know. So, but I always knew that it was them undertones. So now I never had to run in with somebody where I had to like put hands on them, you know. Except for when I was a kid and we was just fighting, but I didn't know why. So I guess that could be it, but that was just like, hey, black versus white after school, and that was the thing, you know. So
well, I think part of that, if I just can touch on that real quick, a part of that comes from who we've been raised by, you know, or who showed us what. So this conversation has been going on for a long time, and there's certain people that didn't bring it up, and there's certain ones that did. What I will say, and I'm sorry, Joe, I'm not able to drop the link. I'm not sure why, but I tried to drop the link. But either way, what I will say is, you guys know that I am part of a social club. I've been in this social club for probably about, I would say about 7 years. And the club has been around for about 30 years. Okay. And it started off as a black club in Brooklyn. And it started off with a fire company that was Club Team 17 in Brooklyn, New York. And that team started a club which started off with just men, black men. And then it developed into multiple women and multiple men and from various states. Okay. So we're all the way from South Carolina. Shout out to Dr. Nikki, because I told you we'll be in South Carolina in a couple months. And I'm looking for you to come down there and visit us. We've gone all the way up the East Coast and been in various states. But the point is earlier on, there was a time where the older folks or the older generations kind of thought that same way, and kind of thought that black people were inferior to lighter skinned people, or darker skinned black people were inferior, or at least that's what they were taught. But that's not what they have taught their generations or their later generations. And this is kind of what we passed down, over time. So societies have a way of changing the way that they think and changing the way that they do things. Okay. And that will shape how things are done in the future. So I love the conversation that we've been having, just based off of what we've experienced and some of the things that we've seen. And now I want to get kind of, because we're about an hour and 30 minutes in. And what I'd like to do is kind of talk about what we can do for the future, because particularly we on Lock, you have younger children, okay? You have
Yes.
children that are younger than my son. My youngest son, I have 6 kids, as y'all know. My oldest child is 25 and my youngest child is 13, okay? So clearly there are very, very vast differences on how they see things as far as race, okay? And race wars and different things like that. So what kind of things are you teaching your children now? And I'll start off with me, with my son. I very much, and I'll just say this with him because he's kind of sets alone with the other kids, okay? My oldest child is 25, and then I have a 24-year-old, I have a 21-year-old, I have a 20-year-old, and I have an 18-year-old now. She just turned 18 a couple weeks ago. So they're all kind of in the same mindset when it comes to race and when it comes to, various topics within the world. But my son, who's 13, he kind of sets aside on his own, he kind of thinks his own way and just kind of thinks the way that he thinks. And I very much, I'll say this. I really do embrace how he feels. Okay. I embrace what he feels, what he thinks in regards to race. I embrace what he has thought about in regards to race. And his ideas are racism doesn't particularly exist. It's not something that exists nowadays. He's aware of it. He knows what happened in the past. He knows that this was something that has shaped the future. But he also feels like he has the ability to keep the change of that going. You see what I'm saying? Like he feels like, when his kids grow up, it won't be this way because the people that are around him and the people that are growing up with him and his friends and younger are not thinking like the older generations were thinking. Okay. So perhaps the world will be different by the time he gets 30 and 40 and has kids and grandkids and, and different things like that. And I want to embrace that because I don't necessarily want him to live in a world where we experience these kinds of things. I don't want him to have to go to a pharmacy and feel like he was discriminated against for getting medication for his child, or I don't want him to feel like, because he's a Black man, he's being stopped for something, even though he's light skinned, he has a lighter hue than I do. He's still a Black man and I don't want him to experience that. So I embrace that in a sense, but I'm kind of afraid for him because I still think that there will be people within his generation that still want to think this way, And I just wonder what you'll think or what you think, we unlock, and how you're going to handle your children or even the conversations that they've had.
Well, luckily for my 2 lighter skin children, which it really doesn't make a difference to me because I love them both very much. My oldest daughter, which is 11, and my youngest son, he's 7 years old. They go to a school which everybody loves everybody. They get along just like a regular rainbow coalition. I'm not talking about the
that
rainbow.
would scare the hell out of me.
Not the rainbow coalition of today. I'm talking about the rainbow coalition of the Black Panthers with the whites and the Mexicans. That's the regular rainbow coalition.
Yeah.
So
I understand what you're saying because I'm not trying to cut you off, but I really understand that because my son is kind of the same way. He has a multitude of friends, that are Black, Hispanic, white, and they come from different backgrounds. And all of them, even the white kids, there's one white kid that he has that's a friend of his that the older family are racist. Okay. But the child is very outspoken about that. He has a couple of teenage sisters who have Black boyfriends and so forth, and they're very outspoken about race, very outspoken about that. And yeah, I just kind of wonder how, what the
Well,
difference.
she's gonna have we're gonna have that we're gonna have that conversation.
Mhm.
Especially my oldest. I always tease her because apparently she likes this little light-skinned boy that's in the 7th grade, and she's in the 6th grade, and she, they play basketball or whatever, and every time I see her, she has that glow on her face, and I always make fun of her, and I just sing that song, "You're at my mind." Anyway, and so I would have to, I would have to tell them, I would have to tell them a little story, since they like me to tell stories at night right before they go to bed. And I would have to tell them something about the blue vein effect. And they'll be like, "What's that?" And I'll gradually have to go into that, because again, I mean, they are taught Black history in school, but we are mainly in a place in the state of Nevada called Las Vegas, Nevada, that is number one in not teaching our kids anything. And I believe we're number one and number two in piss poor education.
No, South Carolina has everybody beat in everything. So no, y'all are not number one. South Carolina is not gonna let y'all have that.
Either number one or number two.
And also Mississippi are very low in education, especially on Black education. So
yeah, we don't hardly teach Black education at all. But I know our school, the school that they go to a private school. They do. But again, I will have to gradually tell them a story about some things like this, and obviously it will educate their mind, it will stimulate their minds a little bit. And of course, my youngest son, he's gonna have all the questions in the world, all the questions like, well, what's this and what's that and what's this? And my daughter, I know she's gonna be prone to is like, "Oh, Black history again, Dad?" I'm like, yup, because if you do not learn your history, you're doomed to repeat it. So I think it would be wise for it would be wise for parents who always practice common sense and intelligence and decency to talk with their children just a little bit about colorism, racism, and all the isms in the world. That's what I think, because it's not affecting them now, but it will surely affect them in days to come. The scenario may the world may change. Excuse me, the world may change, but the scenario stays the same. Nothing is it's more like black and white. Nothing is gray. Nothing is freaking gray anymore.
absolutely, especially now, just because of, well, I'll say this. I do believe that there was a time in the earth, or Kai, whatever we want to call it, where Black people ruled, or Black people were the only people. Okay. And, then that was invaded, and that was changed, and it became a problem. And I do think that we should not necessarily be, I think that there's a healthy balance when it comes to where my son is at, and feeling like, race doesn't particularly exist. And then understanding the past, so that we don't repeat the past. Because like you said, if we don't understand our past, then we're doomed to repeat the past, because we're humans, and humans just do what humans do.
Correct.
I definitely think that it is a deep conversation that we should be having with our kids, and also opening that dialogue with them and their friends as well, which I think will help combat this problem. Because these are things that our older generations did not necessarily talk to us about. And if they did, they talked about it from a place of protection, quote unquote, okay? Whereas they talked about, like, for instance, with my father, when I had conversations about race with my father, even though part of his family is white people, okay? His conversation with me was so that I understood my chocolate skin, okay? And I understood what I would be facing as a Black woman, okay? Even though I don't think he wanted me to be oppressed as a Black woman, I think because of what he experienced in, in the 50s, the 60s, and the 70s, I think he wanted to make sure that I did not experience the same things. And so he wanted to teach me, about the world, quote unquote, and what the world he was living in. Okay. And I also wanted to do the same things with my kids, but I understood after a period of time that they were experiencing something different. You see what I'm saying? Like, they're not, like, even with my daughter who just graduated, and I'm just going to sidetrack for a second. My daughter that just graduated from high school, she had multiple LGBT people within the graduated class, okay? They were recognized as LGBT, okay? And that's not something that we heard of when we graduated. I know you guys know that. When we graduated from high school, that wasn't something that was recognized as as an award, or a particular part of the high school curriculum that was important. Okay.
Right, but I don't think it should be. I mean, it's like saying, "Oh, let's recognize Nikki and her black ass." Like, what?
Well, I agree, but at the same time, I do agree with you. But at the same time, I think it's important to understand the differences. Okay, like when we were growing up, that wasn't something that was recognized, and it wasn't something that we thought should be recognized. The reason
Right, but
why
I should be called black and heterosexual. Like, my sexual preference is personal, and it also can change. So I wouldn't even
well,
want that
I,
stamp.
well,
But
I
but
agree.
go ahead. I get what you're
But
saying.
the reason why I'm saying that is because there was a time where children who were LGBT were teased and beaten and went through all kinds of stuff, just because they came out as such. Okay. But nowadays, this is normal amongst kids. This is not something that they would, they would bat an eye to. This is not something that
Right, but
they
they're
felt
still
was bad.
human beings. Like, I would not want that recognition.
No, I agree with you, Nikki. I
Like, I
really
don't
do.
understand that in the context of education. I don't understand what the hell that has to do with anything.
I
You're a
think that,
student.
well, I agree. And I think that's the way it should be. Okay. But that's honestly not the way that it has been. Okay. And so now the fact that the children are able to just go about life and this is a normal thing to them. Okay. This is not something that they kind of look twice at or kind of, say, but at our time, that's something we looked twice at. That's not something they talked about. That's not something that was quote unquote normal. Okay. So if that would change, and if that would be something that is normal to kids that are her age, okay, I can only imagine how when my son, who's 13, who has no care about anybody's color per se, okay, even though he understands, he heard about it, he watched Roots, he did all that stuff, okay, he has no understanding of why, even though I've explained it to him, even though my mother has explained it and other things, he really does not understand why this is a big deal, because the people, his peers amongst him, also don't understand why this is a big deal. They're giving pushback to the older generations and their families. These kids nowadays are very open-minded. They talk back. They ain't got no problem speaking up on how they feel. They've been very open about, with the older generations about how wrong that is and so forth and so on. They're talking with one another. They're hanging out with one another. And so racism to them is not normal. Okay? It's not something that they agree upon and something that they would do.
Mm-hmm.
So I wonder if when he gets to that age, when he gets to 18, he's about to graduate, when he's 19, if, being Black and white and Hispanic and Chinese and everything else is going to be normal to them. It doesn't matter what color you are, it doesn't matter what race you are. It doesn't matter where you came from, how light your eyes are, how light your skin is, if you can see your veins, and different things like that. These things are stupid to them at 13 years old. So imagine how they'll be at 23. Imagine how they'll be at 33, 43, 53. You see what I'm saying? Are they going to have the same mindset that we've had? Are they going to have the same mindset that our parents had? I don't think they will. And I think that's important to recognize that, and to talk about that, and also to clear up this problem of colorism, because that has been a major problem that has plagued the generations prior,
Well, if you're
Yeah.
gonna if you're gonna do that, if you're
Mhm.
gonna clear up this problem, then I suggest one of these town hall meetings and find out who you really are as people, as Black people, as Black Americans, African Americans, whatever you want to call yourselves.
Right.
Find
Which
out
is
that.
good. Which is
Find
good
out
what you
that
said.
particular. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, which is good what you said, because that kind of segues into something I wanted to talk about. Dr. Umar Johnson had brought up the pretendians. Okay.
Him and them words.
The pretendians. So, we often have conversations in these types of sectors about Pan-Africanism, okay, and what Pan-Africanism means. And if Pan-Africanism means that there is a race of, or at least a group of Black people that have come from Africa, which I believe we all believe, okay? We all believe that the first man originated in Africa on Earth, okay? So if that's the case, did that man spread out, from his seed to various parts of the earth, okay? I did a video months ago on race in other countries and how the Black race has been suppressed in those countries, where, for instance, in Australia, you'll think that the Aboriginal person of Australia is a white person, when in actuality it's a Black person, okay? The Aboriginal people of the West Indies are Black people. The Aboriginal people of the Asian lands are Black people, and various things. And then in America, only in America, there seems to be this notion where the Aboriginal people are white people, and that they brought Black people over here to this land from Africa, okay? When in actuality, if you look back into your history, and a lot of Americans can look back into their history and see that their family originated here, whether they came over here from Africa as a slave, or whether they came over here from Africa as a free person and decided to establish land in this land, okay, or establish, homesteads in this land, okay. So that particularly happened with my family, okay. I can't say, like I said, I can't say whether that happened with my grandmother's family, because I know they're Black people, okay. But with the rest of the family, with other members, with my mother's father's family, with my father's mother's family, I can say that for sure they were here already, okay. They were never slaves. None of them were slaves, okay. But they were here, okay. So what does that mean for the future? Okay, because when we're talking about reparations, when we're talking about America repaying our people for what happened to our people, we often find ourselves in arguments with one another, over who deserves that, who doesn't deserve that, and so forth and so on. And then we start bringing up colorism conversations, like, well, who was raped by a master, or who was brought over here as slaves, or who originated in this land, and, and so forth and so on. So where does that leave us for the future generations? Because ultimately, like I said, we can talk about this all day and night, okay? But I think all four of us understand that at no point in our lifetime are we actually going to see such reparations, okay? It might happen after the fact. It might happen, a couple generations down, but it's not going to happen while we're living. We're just not going to see it. So what type of conversations should we be having with our future generations in regards to this? How should they be going about collecting reparations? Because honestly, I do believe that whether you were a free Black or whether you were an enslaved Black in America, you definitely deserve reparations. Your family deserves that. Okay. So we have to talk about this when it comes to Pan-Africanism. Okay. Because we've got people like Dr. Umar Johnson, his family happens to originate in Cuba, okay, which are Black people. The Aboriginal people of Cuba are Black people, okay? But they are not Americans, okay? And so there are some who will speak against reparations when it comes to foundational Black Americans, okay? And I call them foundational because either you were a descendant of a slave that was brought here, or your family came here and established land and established homesteads in this land before the white man came over here and took over. Okay, so it's one or the other. I can't say particularly that the people that came here and established land are foundational more than somebody who was brought here as a slave. I really have a hard time with distinguishing those two. Okay. We can argue all day about that, but I honestly don't think there's much of a distinction. Okay. But
I would love to argue with you too, but
go ahead. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I gotta go ahead and check because I got my live in a few minutes. But
okay, yeah, I'll be over there for the pajama party. Shout out to We Unlock, y'all. Make sure y'all check out the pajama party on We Unlock Nation. I will be over there, bro. But you can just give your last words because I'm actually about to end the show anyway. But
well, my words of encouragement: don't give in to colorism, because we, at the end of the day, we're all human. We're all human beings trying to live in a life, a society where every goalpost is being moved, regardless of the color of your skin. The blue vein society is just another thing of just saying we're going to violate the Blacks one way or the other, regardless of their skin. Because they never wanted you in the first place, whether if you were dark skin or light skin. But we need to come in a new generation. We need to come up with a new, better code. We need to come up with our own code. We need to rewrite our history the way we see fit. And that's the way I see it.
Okay, well, I don't agree with revisionist history because that's where all the lies come about. But I will say that, so the Blue Vein Society is not a society of people who were attacking other Black people. It was more like a collection of people who, it's kind of like, well, let me put this out there to see who all, is doing this. for lack of a better term. But I did want to say this, that language is the greatest carrier of culture. And as long as there is and race and gender is always present because of language, and our words have a history associated with those words as far as how they came into being, and we call that etymology. However, unless we change up language and kill off everybody, these things are still going to be present. My issue is the mindfulness and the awareness of it. You can't just go walking through life like everybody accepts you in the skin that you're in. That's
Exactly.
not true. And although, your friends might be cool with it, again, as T Pre mentioned, they still have parents and grandparents who are not. And at some point in time, they will get the conversation or the talk. Not only that, what I wanted to know is, and I've asked this question several times, but not been in the right circles to ask it to the intended audience, is so what do white people use to measure or to make their whiteness visible? Because their whiteness isn't visible until black is on the scene.
100. I agree.
Because again, this blue vein society was about who could pass into something.
Right.
I don't think white folks look at other white folks and judge whiteness by who can see a blue vein.
Exactly, because that's funny, because at the time when the Blue Vein Society was up and popping, white people didn't care about that. They could care less.
But again, it goes back to this idea that race is a performance, because if the only thing that separates a light skinned passable black person from a darker skinned unpassable black person is whether or not we can see your vein, then I mean, again, what performance comes along with that? So there's a performance that goes along with whatever you self-identify as. So, hopefully, somewhere down the line we can do a show on these things that we're actually performing that really have that we're saying it has an essence to it, but it's not something that's quantifiable. If that makes sense.
It does.
It's like there's no criteria or counting that you can do to physically say, because you meet these 10 things, that means you are this.
Right.
So,
do you have anything to add to that?
Well, I just have my own conclusion here. Just a quick synopsis wrap up. Personally, because you guys covered a lot. We were talking about raising kids and doing things a little differently. We've been lucky enough to keep our kids away from a lot of the stigmas that we experienced as youngsters. I mean, stigmas from our parents, the programming. We didn't do that to our children. Some of the family accused us as being isolationists, with these kids. But, I'm glad that they all grew up to basically take the world in the way that they see it. They see the racism, they see the things, but they're more like socially active in it. They're progressives, and they're all about bringing about change. What's funny, I was saying earlier that I literally had another grandchild show up while on this live, but I had to support your show, right? So
congrats.
It's funny. Thanks. It's funny because the wife, she comes in and goes, yeah, and then once we get her ABCs going, and then she says, I got to show her all about Harriet Tubman and all of Black history. So as you can see, like we're already on to the next generation with their education, and things. Yeah. So this baby will be okay, like all of them. You know what I'm saying? So we trying to like move the needle a little bit at a time by just kind of not taking our ignorance into the next generation. And so far, so good. So hopefully we can keep that going. And all of us, and it's going to be amazing to see what they do with the world, because things are becoming more and more polarized out here. It's a lot worse than what it was. So I'm just waiting to see. Hopefully these, we'll see. I don't even want to speculate. We'll say that for another conversation. I'm pretty sure this thing will continue.
Yes.
And I would love to be a part of it.
Wait a minute, second, Bombay. I got to say this, please. that whole term of our ignorance is not about us being ignorant. It's about the disrespect or the lack of respect that the generations have for each other's Black experiences.
Yeah,
Our Black experiences are different according to the generations. Again, there's certain things I can say to people who are in my generation that would be offensive to my grandmother, and I have the wherewithal not to use that language around her because I respect her Black experience. So when we don't give, respect to each other's Black experiences and this difference, that's what becomes ignorant. It's not us being ignorant as a generation ahead. Like, I
Oh,
can't disrespect what my grandson is into because he listens to music that I was like, oh my gosh, it sounds like Satan is coming, but he loves it.
I
right.
yeah, I
And
meant
other
more
kids
so the
listen to it too
programming.
because of the videos and stuff that they do. But even still, even with the programming, if that's a term, like, because I'm uncomfortable with the word programming. Again, it's about things you need to know in order to survive. And if that's programming,
Yeah.
then I'm glad I got it.
No. I mean, I'm talking about the negative side of it. The you can't succeed. The odds are so far against you. That's what I mean when I said in my experience, it was like
Right.
negative program. It made it seem
Right, and
like
I
there was no
respect your experience
reasoning going
because you're coming
outside.
from a different part of the United States than I am. Like, I'm considered the South, whereas you're not. So in the South, my Black experience was a little bit different, although it was going on at the same time. So I
Right.
can respect that,
And you
and
know what?
acknowledge that it's
Add to that,
happening.
and just to add to that, my father, like I said, I've had multiple conversations with my father in regards to race when I was younger. And my father is from Georgia. Okay, so
Totally different beast.
that speaks for itself. Okay. And then,
Absolutely.
I'm from Jersey. Okay. So my dad birthed me in Jersey. Okay. So I'm not used to certain things. I'm used to seeing various races and different things just interacting with one another. So it's easy for me to say I didn't have my first encounter with racism until I was 18 years old. I was a grown woman. My father experienced that much younger than I did, you know, and
Exactly. I'm just saying it's just not an ignorance.
right,
It's a lack of an awareness and a
lack of awareness.
respect
Right.
to this is your Black experience, and I have to respect and acknowledge whatever traumas, whatever mishaps, whatever happen as something that is real, and not necessarily be dismissive to it as, oh, well, that's not a Black experience. It is. We have so
Right.
many different Black slices of life, which is why we are so interesting and beautifully Black, as I like to call my students. Y'all
Absolutely.
crazy as hell, but we're beautifully Black, and I recognize all of it.
Which is why I think it's so important. And we're going to end it with this because I'm going to go over to We Unlock. So make sure you guys check him out. But I think it's so important to have these types of conversations. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Particularly if there is people who are of mixed race or people who have been in families such as mine who has multiple hue colors within the family and different things like that. And even outside of that, if you have even one hue color in your family or two or so, and you're having conversations about colorism, or if you're feeling like there is a lighter skinned person that is oppressing you, or a darker skinned person that is oppressing you, or so forth and so on. These are conversations that we need to have and open up about the past and what has happened in the past and why those conversations have come up and why people are talking like they are now. You know, instead of pointing the finger at one another, I think we need to look much deeper into our history. You know, look much deeper into who pitted us against one another, okay, and why and how we got to the point where we would start pitting ourselves against each other. And that is the only way that we are going to clear this up. This is the only way that we're actually going to be able to get this, to the bottom of this problem, is by having these painful dialogues with one another. Talking about things that our ancestors have talked about, talking about things that we're talking about now, talking about things with our children and understanding our children and where they're coming from, where our grandchildren are coming from. and embracing those things, and teaching them about the past, but not necessarily bombarding them with the past.
Right. They need to live with a sense of it. You don't have to live in the past to live with a sense of your past. That's the problem. Some people don't live with a sense of their past.
Right. And I think it's important. Like, I've been very honest with my son in regards to race, in regards to what has happened in the past. But I haven't necessarily exposed him to everything, because I don't necessarily want him to be angry either, kind of like what I've taught my 21-year-old and my 24-year-old son. Their experience with their blackness is different from my 13-year-old. Their experience, they've seen how the police behave, with black men. They've actually seen how, and they've experienced various things with the police and various things with even black people, that my 13-year-old has not experienced. And so I have to have a different approach with them and talking with them in regards to things, because there's things that they've seen that I've also seen. There's things that they've experienced that other Blacks in my family have experienced. But then my 13-year-old has never seen these things, but I do want to embrace where he's coming from, just simply because I think that the others in his generation are feeling the same way, and they have the ability to change the world. They are the ones that's going to change some things. Okay.
Absolutely.
Their generation of children after them that they have are just simply not going to tolerate it. You see what I'm saying? They're like, what? Like, what are you talking about?
Absolutely.
They're just not going to tolerate racism. They're not going to tolerate someone coming against them because of their skin color, because that's going to be very foreign to them. Okay. Things that are very close to us, things that we've actually experienced, things that we've actually seen are actually dying off with our generations, and the older generations before us. So is it high time now to teach them about the Blue Vein Society and about how colorism came about and what they can do to change that, and embrace those changes, and that's something I wanted to talk about tonight. But I really, really appreciate both of you and also We Unlock for being in the building and talking about this. Did you guys have any final words? Dr. Bombay, did you have any final words for the show?
I thought those were our final words.
Oh, okay.
Wait a minute. I have a final word.
Your final
Bombay is super dope as always, and it's always a pleasure to spend time with you.
I appreciate
And the
that.
time is always right for tea. Pre-e-e-e-e. Super dope conversation with super dope people. I love it.
And we are going to finish out this conversation at another time. There's some other things. Shout out to all of you who are in the building. Make sure you guys hit the like button on the way out. I just thought that it was very important to have this conversation on the first day of the year and kind of show the conversation to the public, because we have been talking about this in the sector lately. Shout out to Alan Logic, who has been talking about this and the Mayat scales. Also, Dee Durrell had a very fire panel last night in regards to his difference of opinion in the Mayat scales and also regards to colorism. And everybody else that has been talking about this, because there's been a lot of chatter around the sector lately. But this conversation, the loungers have had about 4 months ago. So I just wanted you guys to hear what we talked about. And I appreciate you guys for tuning in. Shout out to Brother of a Certain Age, KKC, A Hill, Defrauding Charlatans, TMK, HM, Alan Logic, all of you who have come into the building. Truly appreciate you guys. And shout out to all the loungers in the clouds and everybody who will catch the replay. I will talk to you guys later. I truly appreciate you guys for tuning in. And again, make sure you hit the like button on the way out. Peace, guys, and Happy New Year to everyone.